My name is Lena, and the night I almost broke completely, it started to rain. Not the soft, poetic kind, the kind that drums against windows like a warning, the kind that makes the world feel like it's splitting in two. And maybe it was. Because that night, I had nothing left to hold. No one left to call. Just me, my knees on the cold pavement, mascara bleeding into my skin, my throat raw from screaming at a sky that didn't answer back. I had run. From my apartment. From my phone. From the echo of my own heartbeat. I left my keys behind. My shoes too, eventually. I wanted the pain. Needed it. I wanted the gravel to bite into my soles, the cold to crack through my ribs. I wanted something real to pull me out of the fog, because grief doesn't feel like sadness. It feels like drowning in a silence so loud, it breaks you from the inside out. I don't know how long I ran before I collapsed, but the streetlights were blinking above me like dying stars, and I remember thinking, this is it. Not death, but the pause before a life truly ends. That hollow silence where you're technically still breathing, but everything that made you you has already faded out like the tail end of a song. My palms hit the concrete hard. I didn't even flinch. I just sat there, in the gutter, crying like a child. Ugly crying, hands clutched to my face like I could hold myself together if I pressed hard enough. And then, I heard him. Pause. Not heavy, not light, just steady. Rhythmic, closer. I didn't look up at first. I thought it was someone's dog, maybe a stray, maybe a ghost, I don't know. But then I felt warmth, not a touch, just presence. Something real, watching me, breathing with me. I lifted my head, hair stuck to my face like wet thread, and there he was. A dog. Big, soaking, mud-covered, golden, brown? Hard to say under the street lamp. He didn't bark, didn't whine. He just stood there, looking at me, eyes the color of old wood and bruised skies. And in those eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in months. Recognition. Not of who I was, not of my name, but of what I felt. He knew. He didn't ask why I was broken. He didn't need to. He just walked forward, slow and careful, like he didn't want to scare me, and gently sat beside me. That's it. No theatrics. Just there. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I wasn't alone. I reached out without thinking. My hand shaking, fingers trembling like bird bones. He leaned into my palm, heavy and warm. I crumbled again, not with screams this time, but a slow, aching kind of sob. The kind that comes from being seen when you're shattered. He let me hold him. He let me bury my face in his wet fur. Arms wrapped around his thick neck like he was the last tether to something human. And maybe he was. He smelled like rain and dirt and the wild, and in that moment, he smelled like salvation. I don't know how long we sat there. Him silent, me breaking, the world spinning somewhere else. Eventually, the rain softened. The city too. And I heard the faint buzz of life picking up again, cars in the distance, neon signs flickering back to life. The world remembering it had to keep moving. But I didn't want to move. I was scared that if I let go, he'd vanish, like everything else. But he didn't. He stayed. Even when I stood up slowly, legs aching, spine tight. Even when I whispered barely audible, "Come on," he followed. Like he'd always meant to. Like he'd been waiting. He didn't have a collar, no tag, no leash. Just that quiet loyalty that asked for nothing but presence. We walked through the night. Me, a soaked ghost of a girl. Him, my shadow. People passed us, but I don't remember their faces. I don't remember their judgment. Maybe they saw a crazy girl and a dirty dog. Maybe they saw nothing at all. But I remember the rhythm of his steps beside mine. The way he'd glance up at me every so often, like checking to make sure I was still breathing. When we got to my apartment, I hesitated. I stared at the door like it might eat me alive. Everything inside was filled with ghosts. The couch, the photos, the voicemail I hadn't deleted, the unanswered messages, the stupid coffee cup he left in the sink before the accident, but the dog he nudged my hand with his nose. Gently, not forcing, just reminding me I was still here. I could still go in. I could still try. So I did. I unlocked the door, pushed it open, and we stepped into the past together. The apartment smelled like old takeout and memories I didn't want, but he didn't care. He trotted in like he belonged, circled the rug once, and flopped down with a sigh so human, I almost laughed. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching him, my hands wrapped around myself like armor. I should have shooed him out. I should have checked if he had an owner, posted a picture, done the responsible thing, but I couldn't. Not yet. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor with him, my back against the wall, knees hugged to my chest. I watched him breathe. Studied the way his chest rose and fell like tides. He looked peaceful. Not happy, not sad, just present. Like the only thing that mattered was that we were both still here. I don't remember falling asleep. But when I woke up, the sun was bleeding through the blinds, soft and golden, and he was still there, curled up beside me. Warm. Real. Alive. I whispered, "Hey!" He opened one eye, thumped his tail once. Just once. But it was enough. Enough to make my throat catch again, but not from pain this time. From something quieter. Softer. Hope. The kind you don't trust yet, the kind you don't name. But it was there. I named him later. Not right away. I was scared to. Scared naming him would mean losing him, that it would make it real in a way I wasn't ready for. Like giving him a name meant he could be taken away, just like everything else I'd ever loved. But he stayed. Day after day. Through the silence, through the grieving, through the long nights of me crying into nothing, he was there. A heartbeat I could anchor to. A warmth I didn't deserve. I started to talk to him. First, just out loud, like people do when they're alone too long, then really talk, like he was listening, like he understood. And the more I talked, the more I realized I needed him. Not just to cope, but to remember. To remember that I was still someone, that I still had a voice, that I could still connect. One day, I was sitting on the balcony with him, legs dangling off the edge like some tragic painting. I told him everything. Not all at once, but enough. About Daniel. About the accident. About the phone call that splintered me. About how I didn't even scream when they said he was gone. I just stood there, staring at the wall like, if I didn't move, it wouldn't be true. I told him I hated God, and the world, and myself, for not answering the call that morning, for fighting the night before, for letting Daniel walk out into that storm with anger between us instead of love. And the dog, he didn't flinch. He just leaned against me, his head heavy on my thigh. His breathing, steady. I didn't know how something that didn't speak could say so much. That day, I finally whispered, "You need a name." He looked up, ears perked. I laughed. A real one this time, small, shaky, but real. "River," I said. "You're like a river. Quiet, constant, pulling me forward, whether I want to move or not." He licked my hand once. And that was it. River. Not mine, not yet, maybe never. But something. Someone. River didn't fix me. That's the thing people never understand about grief. There's no fixing, no magical day where the pain lifts and you're you again. There's just surviving. One breath, one choice, one moment at a time. He helped me survive. We made a routine. Morning walks, coffee on the steps, watching the world pass us by. He was always beside me, not demanding anything, just being. That was his gift. Presence. In a world that had taken everything else, he gave me that. One night, maybe 3 weeks after I found him or he found me, I caught myself smiling at nothing, laughing at the way he chased his tail like he was making fun of himself. And that night, when I went to sleep, I didn't cry. It terrified me, because it meant I was starting to feel again. And feeling meant risking. And risking meant losing. But River, he didn't leave. He never pulled away when I flinched from hope. He never judged the days I couldn't get out of bed, or the nights I held his fur like it was the only thing tethering me to this earth. He just stayed. Unwavering. Unspoken. Unbelievably real. And sometimes, in the dark, when everything was quiet, I let myself believe maybe Daniel sent him. Maybe in that space between the world and whatever comes next, he saw how lost I was. Maybe, he whispered to the wind, "Go to her." Maybe River was the answer to the prayer I never had the courage to say out loud. Maybe. Or maybe he was just a stray. But even strays can save us. And I was starting to believe I was worth saving. The first time I laughed so hard, I cried again. River had fallen asleep on my sketch pad, head on a half-finished drawing of Daniel. It smudged, ruined. I stared at it in horror for a second. But then I saw River's drool on the page. The absurdity of it. The sacredness and the ridiculous colliding. I laughed, tears spilling, laughter choking me. River opened one eye, then closed it again like he didn't care. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't just helping me remember. He was helping me begin. Again, not like before, not with blind hope or fairy tales, but with the quiet, painful, beautiful truth that even when everything breaks, something can still grow in the cracks. River didn't fix me, but he stayed. And that God, that was everything. I think it was that night the sketch pad, the smudged drawing, River drooling on Daniel's face that something quietly shifted. Not like a door slamming open, but like light creeping in under it. Gentle, uninvited, persistent. I didn't ask for healing. I didn't even believe in it. But River, in his stubborn, wordless way, kept showing up with pieces of it anyway. It was the little things at first. The way he'd nudge my hand every morning when the alarm went off, an alarm I'd started setting again, just to feel like I had somewhere to be, even if I didn't. The way he'd bark at the mail slot like it was possessed, then look back at me proudly, like he'd just saved the apartment from a demonic envelope. The way he'd lie on my feet while I sketched, grounding me to the floor like an anchor with a heartbeat. I started drawing again. Not Daniel. Not at first. I couldn't face his face, not without the guilt flooding my lungs again, making it impossible to breathe. So I drew River. Over and over. In graphite, in charcoal, in watercolor. Sleeping, sitting, eating, watching me with those two knowing eyes. And each stroke of the pencil felt like a stitch in some invisible wound. Not enough to close it, but enough to keep it from bleeding out. I even posted a few online. Not for attention. Just to prove to myself I was still someone who created, not just someone who lost. One morning, I woke up and found River curled up beside my bed with one of my old hoodies between his paws, Daniel's hoodie. The faded navy one he used to wear when he worked late and didn't want to be cold. The one I hadn't touched in months. The one I'd buried in the back of the closet, like touching it again would tear me open. River had found it, pulled it out, slept with it like it was his. And something about that undid me. I sank to the floor beside him, picked up the hoodie, and held it against my face. It didn't smell like Daniel anymore. It smelled like time. Like dust and dog fur and the salt I'd cried into it when I thought no one was watching. River pressed his head into my lap, and I whispered, "I miss him so much." I hadn't said it out loud before, not like that, not with all the softness and none of the armor. River didn't move. He didn't need to. Just the weight of him was enough. Like he was saying, "Me too." Or maybe I know. The days kept unfolding like pages of a book I didn't know I was writing. Some of them hurt, some of them bled, but others were quieter, gentler. I started walking farther, past the usual blocks, into the park Daniel and I used to go to when we first moved in together. I hadn't been there since the funeral. River tugged me there one day, not forcefully, just insistently. Like he knew the trail better than I did. We reached the old oak tree near the pond, and I stopped so fast he bumped into the back of my knees. The tree still had our initials carved into it, L+D, a little crooked heart around it. We'd done it on a dare one summer, laughing like idiots, using a key because we didn't have a knife. I remember Daniel saying, "Now it's permanent, even if we're not." I hated how right he was. But standing there now, with River beside me and leaves drifting like ash from the sky, it didn't feel like a wound anymore. It felt like a scar, still there, still tender, but no longer bleeding. I touched the carving with the tips of my fingers. Just once. River sat, quiet, watching ducks on the water like he didn't know he was holding the pieces of me together. And I realized he'd never tried to make me forget, only to help me remember in a way I could survive. Later that week, I finally took him to the vet. I don't know why I waited so long. Part of me was still terrified someone would claim him, that they'd walk in, say his real name, and take him away like he was never mine to begin with. But he needed shots, and I needed to stop pretending he was temporary. He barked at the receptionist, peed in the lobby, tried to eat a pamphlet about dental hygiene for senior dogs. But he never left my side. Not when they took his weight, not when they examined his ears. He just kept looking at me like I was the only thing that made any sense. And when the vet, a soft-spoken woman with silver-rimmed glasses, finally looked me in the eye and said, "No chip, no collar, no one's come looking," something inside me unraveled. River was mine. Or maybe I was his. On the way home, I bought him a real collar, dark green with a silver tag that read Arriver on one side and my name and number on the back. I almost cried paying for it. Not because it was expensive, but because it meant I believed he'd stay. That night, I let him sleep on the bed. Not at the foot. Not beside it. On it. His whole body stretched out like he owned the place, tail thumping whenever I shifted, nose twitching in his sleep like he was dreaming of something wild and free. I lay beside him with the window open, the city breathing in and out beyond the glass. I listened to the hum of traffic, the distant echo of someone laughing on the street, the heartbeat of a world I was starting to belong to again. And I whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular. Just out loud. To the air, to the moment, to River. He opened one eye, thumped his tail, then went back to sleep. A week later, I got a message from Daniel's sister. We hadn't spoken since the funeral. She'd been angry, rightfully. She'd blamed me not outright, but in the way people do when grief makes them sharp and desperate for someone to hold accountable. I didn't fight her. I let her have her rage. It was easier than facing my own. Her message was short. Just, "I found an old USB of Daniel's. Thought you might want it. I can mail it. Let me know." My hands shook holding the phone. I read it 3 times before I could even breathe. Then I replied, "Yes, please, thank you." It arrived 3 days later in a yellow padded envelope. No note, just the small black stick, heavier than it should have been. River sat beside me as I stared at it. I couldn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I held it in my palm like it was radioactive, a memory waiting to detonate. River rested his head on my thigh, and I whispered, "Not tonight." The next day, I opened it. It was full of videos. Hundreds. Little clips Daniel had taken on his phone and saved. Most were nothing blurry sunsets, bad angles of his lunch, videos of me laughing at something stupid, but they wrecked me. Because they were alive. And he wasn't. River lay beside me as I watched hours of footage. Some made me smile, some made me sob so hard I had to press pause and curl into myself. River never left. One video changed everything. It was labeled, "For Lena." I almost didn't open it. But I did. Daniel's face filled the screen. He looked tired, hair messy, smiling like he'd just run a marathon. "Hey," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "If you're watching this, I don't know. Maybe I'm being dramatic. Or maybe I just wanted to make sure you had something, just in case." He laughed. That low, quiet laugh that used to melt me. "You always say I don't talk enough, that I keep things in. So, here's me saying it, okay?" He looked down, then back up. "I love you, Lena. Not the easy kind. The real kind. The kind that sticks when it's ugly. The kind that doesn't flinch when it hurts." I covered my mouth with my hand. River pressed closer. Daniel continued, "If I'm not there, I want you to know you were the best thing I ever got right. And I hope I pray that you don't disappear. That you keep drawing. Keep laughing. Keep being stubborn as hell and soft as hell and more alive than anyone I've ever met." He hesitated. "And if something finds you after I'm gone, something, and it makes you feel even a little bit like I did, let it in. Please. Let it in." The screen froze on his face. I didn't press replay. I just sat there, tears sliding silently down my cheeks, River's head heavy in my lap. And for the first time since Daniel died, I felt something I hadn't dared to name. Permission. To breathe. To move forward. Not past him, but with him, carried, somehow, in every line I draw, every step I take, every heartbeat I haven't given up on yet. River lifted his head, looked at me with those dark, warm eyes. And in them, I saw it. Everything. The pain. The survival. The possibility. I leaned down, pressed my forehead to his, and whispered, "You found me before I even knew I was lost." He didn't wag his tail. He didn't bark. He just looked at me. Still. Steady. Like he always had. The morning after I watched Daniel's video, the light felt different. Not brighter, not cleaner, but softer. Like the air wasn't pressing in on me anymore. Like maybe the weight of grief had shifted from a crushing boulder into something I could finally carry without falling apart. I opened every window in the apartment. The curtains billowed like breath, and River padded from room to room, sniffing the change like he was mapping a new world. He stopped in the doorway of Daniel's old studio, the one I had kept closed for 8 months, locked behind silence and fear. I stood there, barefoot on the cool floor, fingers hovering over the doorknob like it might bite. River turned and looked at me. I opened the door. It smelled like dust and stale memory. Nothing had moved. His chair was still there, his easel folded in the corner, blank canvases stacked like forgotten prayers. I hadn't dared to touch any of it, terrified that if I did, I'd lose the last remnants of his fingerprints. But now, standing there in that stillness, with River behind me like a silent witness, I didn't feel the sting of loss. I felt presence, like Daniel was there, just out of sight, nodding once in quiet permission. I walked inside. My fingers skimmed across his work table, the little stains of ink, the worn grooves in the wood from where his elbow always rested. I sat down. It creaked, just like it always had, and for a moment, I closed my eyes and listened. There was no voice, no ghostly hand on my shoulder, just the soft rhythm of River's breathing behind me, and my own. That night, I sketched Daniel again. Not from a photo, from memory. His eyes, slightly uneven, the way his hair always curled a bit at the ends when it got too long, the half smile he wore when he was thinking something he didn't say out loud. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. The first drawing I'd made of him that wasn't wrapped in pain. When I finished, I showed it to River. He tilted his head, sniffed the corner, then licked my wrist. It was approval. I knew it. And that was the night I decided to do something I hadn't done since before Daniel died. I said yes. To life. To possibility. To whatever came next. I applied to the Open Studio program at the Art Center on 8th, the same one I had turned down the year before when Daniel had been in the hospital for pneumonia, and I couldn't imagine doing anything while he wasn't okay. It was a long shot. Late application. No references. Just a link to my portfolio and a trembling cover letter that felt like I was bleeding onto the page. I didn't expect to hear back, but I did. 3 days later, they said yes. They said my work had soul. I stared at the email for 20 minutes before I could breathe. I looked at River. He was chewing a sock, unapologetic. I laughed. Of course he was. You brought me back, I whispered to him. You really did. I walked more after that, farther, slower. I started to see the world again, not just blur past it in survival mode. I noticed the old man on the corner who fed the pigeons every morning, the barista who wore a different pair of glitter earrings every day and whistled off-key to jazz, the cracked sidewalk outside the bookstore where Daniel once slipped and nearly took me down with him. Everything had a color again, even the pain. One afternoon, River and I walked down by the canal. The light was gold, the kind of light that only exists when the day is starting to let go. I sat on the edge of the old stone path and watched River chase a leaf down the current. He looked younger when he played, lighter, like he'd once known sorrow but had chosen not to carry it. A little girl came by with her mother. She stopped when she saw River and gasped like he was magic. "Can I pet him?" she asked, voice small, eyes wide. I nodded. "If he lets you." River stood still as she approached. She knelt and touched his fur like it might vanish. He leaned into her gently, carefully. The mother smiled at me. "He's beautiful," she said. "He saved my life," I replied before I could stop myself. The words stunned me, because they were true. She looked at me. Something in her expression shifted. Recognition, maybe. The way pain knows pain. "I believe it," she said. River wagged his tail. Later that night, as I curled into bed with River snoring beside me, I realized something I hadn't dared to face. The grief wasn't gone. It never would be. But it had changed shape. It no longer swallowed me whole. It sat beside me, like an old friend who didn't need to speak, just be. And River, he wasn't a replacement. He wasn't a distraction. He was a bridge. A living, breathing bridge between the girl I'd been and the woman I was becoming. He'd walked with me through the wreckage. Now he was walking me into something new. Fall turned to winter. Snow blanketed the city in quiet. River hated the boots I bought him, but he wore them anyway. He'd stop every few steps and look at me like this is ridiculous, but he never fought it, never pulled away. That's who he was. Loyal, even when annoyed. I started teaching weekend art classes at the studio. Kids mostly. Some teens. A few broken adults who didn't know they were looking for healing until it spilled out of their fingers and onto the canvas. River came with me. Everyone loved him, especially the ones who didn't speak much. He had a way of making people open, just like he had with me. There was one boy, Theo, who hadn't said a word the first 3 classes, wouldn't look anyone in the eye, but River sat beside him every session, silent, still. And one day, Theo reached over, rested his hand on River's back, and whispered, "Good boy." It cracked something open. In all of us. River wasn't just mine anymore. He belonged to something bigger. He was something bigger. One night, I opened Daniel's video again, watched it with dry eyes. When it ended, I whispered, "I'm okay." River lifted his head, came over, rested it in my lap. I didn't cry. I just breathed. Full. Deep. Honest. Then spring came. River and I went to the coast. Just for a weekend. Just to feel the salt in our lungs. I hadn't been to the ocean since I was a child, but something about it called to me. He chased waves like he'd been born there, barked at seagulls, rolled in sand like a heathen. And I stood at the edge of the shore, barefoot and shaking, the wind tearing through me, and felt Daniel in every gust. But instead of pain, it was warmth. A memory, not a wound. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you." To him. To River. To myself. For staying. For surviving. For daring to feel again. When we got back to the city, I framed the drawing of Daniel and hung it by the front door. Next to it, I put the sketch I'd done of River the week I met him. And under it all, I added a small note. Some angels come on 2 legs, others on 4. Weeks passed. River started sleeping more. I told myself it was just the weather, just age. But part of me knew. He'd given everything, carried every ounce of my sorrow on his back. He was tired. I took him to the vet again. They said it was his heart. Slowing, weakening. No pain, not yet. Just time. A limit. A countdown I wasn't ready to face. I cried on the way home. River rested his head on my shoulder from the back seat, the way he used to when I drove to nowhere just to scream into the void. He knew. Of course he did. Dogs always know. The night he started breathing heavier, I sat with him on the floor, stroked his fur, told him stories. About Daniel, about me, about the way he changed everything. I didn't beg him to stay. I just thanked him. Over and over. He passed at dawn. In my arms, peacefully, softly, a breath leaving the world the way it entered, quiet and full of love. I buried him under the oak tree by the pond, the one with our initials carved into it. L+D. And now I added another, +R. Not for replacement. For reminder. For every silent moment that saved me. For every inch of healing I didn't think I deserved. I visit the tree often. Sometimes with flowers. Sometimes with a sketch pad. Always with memory. River was not a dog. River was a beginning. A heartbeat sent by something bigger than loss. A gift wrapped in fur and thunder and quiet knowing. And I was crying when he came closer. But he didn't stop. He never stopped. And because of him, neither did I. It's been 6 months since River took his last breath in my arms. Sometimes, I still wake up expecting to hear his paws on the floorboards, that soft rhythm like a heartbeat that used to follow me from room to room. I still find strands of his fur caught in the corners of the couch or clinging to the cuff of an old sweater. I don't vacuum them anymore. I leave them, like little threads tying me back to the time I remembered how to be human. The studio walls are full now. Sketches. Paintings. Not all of River, not all of Daniel, but they live there, in the strokes and shadows. In the light I never thought I'd see again, in the silence I learned to make peace with. People come in and ask about the drawing by the door. The one with the dog, staring straight ahead, like he sees something the rest of us don't. Was he yours? They ask. And I smile. Still is. One afternoon, a boy maybe 9 stood in front of the piece for almost 15 minutes. Quiet. Still. His mother whispered that they'd lost their dog last winter. He hadn't spoken about it since. But that day, in front of River's portrait, the boy turned and said, "He looks like he waited for something." His mother nodded, tears in her eyes. "What do you think he was waiting for?" The boy shrugged. "Maybe someone who needed him more than anything. I had to step outside after that. Breathe the cold air. Feel something sharp. Grief doesn't vanish. It changes color. It used to be black, swallowing, thick. Now it's something softer. The ache in my chest when I pass the park bench where River used to sit like an old man, People watching. The pause in my morning routine when I almost fill his bowl out of habit. The way I still leave the balcony door open, just a crack, like he might come running in with leaves in his fur and wildness in his eyes. Some nights I dream of him, not in that soft, surreal dream way. No, in vivid detail. The weight of him leaning into my side, the scratch of his collar, the way he'd stare at me like I was made of something worth protecting. In those dreams, I talk to him like he never left. And sometimes I think he hasn't. A few weeks ago, I was sitting under the oak tree again. The bark around our carved initials is older now, weathered by rain and wind and time. I brought a candle, lit it in the dusk, sat with my knees pulled to my chest, sketchpad in my lap. I wasn't trying to draw, just listening. And that's when I heard it. Pause. Light. Careful. From behind me. For a second, my whole body forgot how to breathe. I turned, heart hammering. It wasn't River. Of course it wasn't. It was a puppy. Shaky legs. Big ears. A tail that wagged like it hadn't learned rhythm yet. She stared at me. Then padded forward, slow, unsure. No collar. No tags. Just eyes the color of River's, only lighter like sunlight through honey. She sat beside me like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't touch her at first. I just stared. Then, slowly, I reached out. She flinched, then leaned into my palm. I cried. Not because I was broken, but because I wasn't. Because something had come full circle. I brought her home, gave her a bath, wrapped her in a towel that still smelled like River, watched her fall asleep on his old blanket, nose tucked under her paw, dreaming. I didn't name her right away, but after 3 days, she stood in front of Daniel's portrait, stared at it for a full minute, then barked once sharp, clear, certain. I smiled. "Okay, girl," I whispered. "Your name is Echo." Because that's what she is. Not a replacement. A reflection. A continuation of the love I thought I'd never feel again. She's chaos. She chews everything, sleeps upside down, whines when I'm 2 feet away. But she's here. Alive. Real. And so am I. Some days, I sit at the window with Echo beside me, coffee in hand, the morning sun filtering through the glass like a promise. I think about all the versions of myself that didn't think they'd make it to this day, and I whisper, "You're safe now." Not just to me, to the ghosts, to the pain, to the girl I was that night in the rain, knees on the concrete, heart in pieces. Because River came, and he didn't stop. And I didn't stop either. Not even when it hurt. Not even when it felt impossible. So here's to the echoes. To the moments that return in a different shape. To the healing that howls and the love that lingers long after breath is gone. River is gone. But he's not. He's in every step Echo takes. Every sketch I draw. Every sunrise I no longer sleep through. I was crying when he came closer. And I'm still crying now. But they're different tears. Not of loss. Of love. Endless. Echoing love.